Well, welcome to the 700 Club. In the midst of Russia's war on Ukraine, a wider conflict may be brewing. From Lithuania to Poland, countries along NATO's eastern flank are on edge.
Moscow is sending drones over the borders of NATO nations. Technically, that's an act of war. George Thomas reports from Warsaw, Poland.
Across Lithuania, fears of a Russian strike aren't just headlines, they're real concerns shaping daily life. Here at an after-school drone course, 11-year-old Emilius Benko is learning how to build, program, and fly one.
Just basically a drone simulation where you can go to single player or multiplayer.
In recent months, Lithuania and its Baltic neighbors, Estonia and Latvia, have reported a sharp rise in Russian drone activity, sometimes inside their airspace. These small nations sit just miles from the Russian border. This has led Lithuania to begin public defense programs like this as part of a broader push to prepare for any crisis.
We develop kind of a strategy how we are preparing our citizens for, militarily, and how we're preparing all the rest of the citizens to build the resilience of our population.
And it's not just the Baltics feeling the pressure. Russian drones have also crossed into Polish, German, Danish, and even Belgian airspace. In September, 20 Russian drones entered Poland, prompting officials here to temporarily close the main airports. To counter the threat, Poland and Romania are using an American-made anti-drone system.
The American MEROP system being used in Poland and Romania is cheaper than deploying a fighter pilot and uses drones to attack drones. It's been tested in Ukraine, is small enough to fit in the back of a pickup truck, and can accurately detect drones and counter them using AI to navigate when communications are jammed.
As Vladimir Putin ramps up his hybrid war, many in Poland quietly worry about the unthinkable: war with Russia.
I've seen some reports that our army is not doing great, and that if there would be a war, it wouldn't take that much time Russia to take over some of our land.
In recent months, thousands of Poles here in Warsaw have signed up for military training. The government aims to create an Israeli-style reserve force numbering some 500,000.
I've recently been participating in a public debate on what happens and what I would do as a citizen, whether I would run away or I would stay and fight. And I have to admit that I don't know what I'm going to do.
In September, 30,000 Polish and NATO troops took part in one of the largest military drills in the country's history. The exercise unfolded less than 60 miles from the Suwalki Gap, a narrow stretch connecting the Baltic states to the rest of NATO. Experts say if Russia ever attacks, this could be one of its first targets.
The importance and strategic significance of the Suwalki corridor is undeniable.
Last month, a new highway opened linking the Baltic states to Poland. It cuts right through the Suwalki Gap between Belarus and Russia's Kaliningrad enclave.
It is a very important artery not only for the movement of goods and people, but also for military mobility.
With Russian drones testing NATO's borders and tensions rising across Europe, one question looms large: not if the alliance is ready, but how soon it may have to prove it. George Thomas, CBN News, Warsaw, Poland.
Well, this has been the fear since the beginning of the conflict. Under President Obama, essentially Russia annexed Crimea and did so with really no conflict and no objection from the U.S. or even the EU. And now that they've expanded it, they want to have a land bridge to the Crimea, and they've invaded Ukraine. And I think Putin's larger goal is to reestablish the Soviet Union. So he wants client states. He wants all of Ukraine. And is Lithuania, Estonia, these other states, is that part of his long-term plan? Unlike Ukraine, those states are part of NATO, and under that treaty with NATO, if one nation is attacked, all the nations are attacked, and all the nations are obligated to respond. Just like Ukraine after Crimea, what happened? It was one of the largest military buildups in history, where instead of being an ineffective army, they've become very obviously very effective army. And they've withheld this onslaught now for years when it was predicted they would lose in a matter of days. Is that going to be the same for Poland? Do they need to arm? Do they need to recruit 500,000 people as part of their military? It seems to be that way. I hope we stand up to these expansions. I've been to these states. They really do not like Russia. And what Russia did during the Soviet Union, they were absolutely under a boot, and they don't want that at all. They like their liberty, they like their freedom, and as a leader in the free world, we need to stand for that freedom. The U.S. military, here's another conflict, it might be expanding its presence on the Israel-Gaza border. And I have to say, we shouldn't be in favor of this. I remember a military base in Saudi Arabia. I remember a military base in Lebanon. Both of them were targets. And do we really want to put our soldiers under that kind of target without the ability to counterstrike? Well, John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Well, Gordon, according to news reports, the United States is considering a plan to build a $500 million military facility along the border. Right now, about 200 American troops are in the area to help monitor the ceasefire. The United States and Israel reached an agreement Tuesday to deport some 200 Hamas terrorists trapped in tunnels on the Israel-controlled side of the Gaza Strip. No country has agreed yet to take in the terrorists. And plans for a Palestinian state continue to take shape as French President Emmanuel Macron met with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in Paris to discuss a new committee to further the process.
This committee will be responsible for working on all legal, constitutional, institutional, and organizational aspects. It will contribute to drafting a new constitution, a project that President Abbas has presented to me, and will aim to finalize all the conditions necessary for the establishment of such a state of Palestine.
In southern Lebanon, Israel continues attacking Hezbollah targets to rid the terror group of weapons and destroy military infrastructure. Well, closer to home, Venezuela is sounding the alarm over the growing U.S. presence there, the South American country putting its military forces on full alert, including ground, aerial, naval, and missile forces, a deployment of nearly 200,000 soldiers. It's a response to the USS Gerald Ford carrier strike group recently entering the region as part of the U.S. effort targeting alleged drug smuggling and international criminal organizations. The action is seen as a part of a larger Trump administration goal to destabilize the regime of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. Well, here in Washington, the U.S. government shutdown could end today. The House of Representatives is expected to vote on a spending bill. The Senate approved the measure Monday after enough Democrats bolted the party to vote in favor. House Democrats failed to amend the bill, which does not include their goal of extending Obamacare subsidies.
Tattoo the Republican health care crisis on the foreheads of every single House Republican who dares vote for this bill.
Republicans have a spare majority, only 2 votes. If it succeeds, the bill will keep the government open through January. Well, the White House is considering support for a new financial instrument to stimulate home buying here in America, a 50-year mortgage. The head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency calls it a complete game changer. Extending the duration of a home loan would decrease monthly payments. Critics, though, point out that borrowers will pay much more interest over the life of the loan, and it will take longer to build equity. High prices and mortgage rates are combining to put home ownership out of reach for younger Americans. CBN's Brody Carter explains.
As one of the fastest growing states, Utah has seen home values explode, up to 44% in just 2 years. That boom has busted family budgets, pushing the average home price over $500,000. The problem boils down to economics, too many buyers and not enough product. Nationally, there's a shortage of roughly 6 million homes.
Most people who are renting here in Utah are spending over 50% of their income on housing.
Zoe Newman with the Utah Housing Coalition sees a vast growing difference between what people earn and what they need to afford a home.
From 2020 to 2025, that housing wage has grown $10, over $10. That is insane.
Over the past 10 years, mortgage payments have more than doubled in major U.S. cities, driven largely by higher interest rates. According to the National Association of Realtors, only 1 in 5 households can afford a medium-priced home in America, the lowest share in decades.
It's not just sort of building affordable housing, it's building housing that the average household, especially people buying for the first time, can afford.
Professor Simon Stevenson, an economist at ODU in Virginia, explains the very definition of affordable housing no longer applies only to the poorest. Today, even average families are struggling, whether it's qualifying for a mortgage or competing with a surge of all-cash buyers.
There aren't that many sellers because people are reluctant to sell. If they locked in, whether they bought or refinanced 4, 5, 6 years ago when rates were down, to around 3%, you're not going to sell unless you have to.
The lack of affordability is also delaying generational milestones, as many young people put off buying a home or even starting a family.
People are buying later, where sort of, say, in the 60s, 70s, people were settling down and marrying earlier. So people were buying a home. My parents, my dad was 24, my mum was 23, they bought a house. That doesn't happen. People are marrying later, but the affordability issue is playing a big role.
Among those hardest hit are seniors on fixed incomes and people with disabilities. For those who can afford it, Stevenson advises now could be the time to act. With demand cooled, prices could climb again as soon as rates fall.
If you can afford to buy now, then you can refinance in 3, 4 years' time, reduce those monthly costs, and I think you're in a better position.
For many families, however, the American dream of homeownership is shrinking. Without policy shifts or a market correction, experts warn that dream will continue to slip further out of reach. Reporting in Salt Lake City, Brody Carter, CBN News.
And Gordon, as you well know, home ownership is seen as the gateway for producing generational wealth.
It is, but at the same time, you have to look realistically at the cost of home ownership. And right now, it's so high, is it really going to lead to generational poverty? Because at 50% of your income, that, frankly, is unsustainable. And are you going to be saving up for the future? The issue on generational wealth is, are you building net worth, and is that happening over time? As long as home prices are going up, you can say, well, I'm building equity in my home. One thing that I need to point out is the high cost of construction, and that is absolutely fueled by the inflationary spiral that happened under President Biden. That the price of lumber quadrupled. And at this point in time, it's nearly impossible to build a home that the average 30-year-old or 35-year-old or even 40-year-old can afford to pay. That is an astounding fact. Now, were there supply chain problems? Was it pandemic demand where everybody wanted a bigger home because everybody had to stay home? And if you were in a small home, you were on top of each other and you didn't like it. So all of those factors went into it. But at this point, it's the high cost of construction along with high interest rates makes it nearly impossible for someone. And if you're locked into a current low interest rate, well, you view that as literally an asset, and you don't want to give it up. You don't want to get a better home. You don't want to move because the cost really is unaffordable. All of that means no inventory for sale. And if there's a demand for housing, well, what's going to happen? Well, prices are going to go up. So we're locked into it. When you look at is a 50-year mortgage a solution, I do want to point out the history of so-called incentives for real estate. It always leads to price increases. So when the federal government gets into the mix and says, well, we're going to make loans easier to get, or we're going to give you a home interest deduction. I'm not arguing that that be taken away. It's impossible for it to be taken away. But when that was put in place, that started the inflationary cycle of home ownership right here in America, because the availability of credit coupled with I can deduct the interest meant more people were willing to pay higher prices for real estate. We're now into the end of that cycle, and we'll see what happens, but demand is not drying up, so prices are going to continue to go up.